really, really excited for this first masterclass, which is 5 tips for raising healthy and balanced eaters. So I'm Limor Ellman, and this is just truly incredible to have you all here and to start the weekend off with you. So we are recording this. The purpose of this class is to help you not freak out overfeeding your kids, managing mealtime, snack time, knowing how much sugar to give your kids, hoping your kids eat a balanced variety of food, all plus diet culture can make any parent's mind spin. And then there's sports, there's competitive sports, there's exercise, body image to worry about. And so I am here for the next hour and change to guide you through the head spinning and hopefully make you feel a little bit more level about it. I also consider this kind of education eating disorder prevention, and I will explain that later. Unfortunately, eating disorders are on the rise and affect children at a younger and younger age every year. So this is a preview of what I do in my one-on-one sessions. My coaching packages are my signature offers, and you can find a lot more about them on my website. I offer these free master classes so you can get a feel for the kind of work I do, and the kind of stuff that we would be talking about in a 3 or 6 month package. I don't offer anything less than 3 or 6 months because I find it takes a while to internalize these ideas and make real and lasting changes. So my next masterclass will be in June and then one in July as well. And I'll be offering a discount on voice message coaching, and I'll explain that at the end, as well as group coaching and individual coaching. So I want to encourage you to remove distractions if you can, and to really focus. You have decided that this is time for you. You've decided that this is important. And so give it to yourself, like really give it to yourself. And also, I encourage you to step outside your comfort zone a little bit, because what I'm about to talk about is absolutely countercultural. And it does require you to take a different sort of outlook and lens on the whole thing, on all of body and food. I want to tell you a little bit about my personal life and then give you tell you about the reason why I'm doing this. So I dieted for 30 years, 30 unsuccessfully, like everybody does. 98% of dieters gain weight. And I don't feel sad. I don't feel shameful about it. Actually, I feel quite neutral because I've done a lot of work around it. And because I know that at the time that I was dieting, it made sense. Dieting was a huge part of life growing up in the 70s and 80s. I'm 52. And everyone around me was dieting. It was what I had to do. It was the norm. My weight went up and down. I yo-yoed for all these years with the hope that I would find a way to stay thin. I did find thinness, but it never stayed. It never happened. But what did happen is that my mental health suffered a great deal. I thought about my body and food and exercise constantly. The mental chatter was loud and real. And most of the time, I felt shame and I blamed myself. Restricting food was impossible, it seemed. I had gotten it all wrong, I told myself, year after year after year. And I know that I am not alone. One day, a few years ago, I literally stumbled upon a friend's blog on the internet about how she decided to stop wearing Spanx Spanx are those very constricting, like underwear kind of shapewear things. She decided to stop wearing Spanx and didn't wear them for her son's bar mitzvah photos. And my mind was blown. How could this be? How could it be that somebody would want to appear in professional photographs without shapewear on? I dug, I learned, I podcasted, and I eventually learned about weight stigma, fat phobia, intuitive eating, and the anti-diet movement. I learned that intuitive eating is exactly opposite of dieting. Intuitive eating is about listening to my body and not the world of wellness and diet culture that sends us messages all the time. I also found out that my body is not a problem to fix, but rather diet culture is, and that my body can exist in any form without apology. This was profound and life-changing, and that is precisely why I am here. Now enter my kids. I have a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old. Fairly soon, I started freaking out over my kids. I had been restricting what they ate. I had been pressuring them to eat certain foods, healthy foods. I had made them wait for treats. I had assigned morality to certain foods and talked about my own desire to shrink my body a lot. This had to stop. I finally figured it out. I worked hard to stop all of this over the last several years, and I think I've been pretty successful. And in all of this life transformation, intense life transformation, I discovered that coaching was key for me to change. So coaching was key, as was supporting community. Just from a professional standpoint, I just want to also tell you that I have 3 decades of experience designing and facilitating workshops. I've been an educator my whole life in so many different settings, corporate, nonprofit, community. I've led large-scale community programs, and most recently, I was the director of a small supplementary school at a synagogue. So I bring you that experience, plus my experience as a reform dieter of 30 years, now an anti-dieter, and a mom of teens. I also am proudly a certified intuitive eating counselor. And I am so honored to have had the opportunity to train with the founders of intuitive eating, of this most amazing life-changing concept, Evelyn Tribole and Elyse Resch. My coaching will help you step outside of your comfort zone and move past your limiting beliefs, your limiting diet beliefs, to a place where you can slowly embrace intuitive eating. Dieting ideas will, over time, get replaced with undieting actions. I know this because I have done it. You can change the way you think and feel, and then get different results and help your family. You are here to do inner work so that you can have external growth. This is about changing your thinking so you can change your feelings and thus your actions. The current version of you is capable of having the result you have now. But in order to create a future version of you, you will need to write the story you tell yourself. And you'll also have to bet on yourself. And I want to do this with you. I'd like to start by defining dieting and diet culture. So I follow Christy Harrison, who is one of the thought leaders in defining diet culture. She wrote a book called Anti-Diet. And this is step 1 in our 5-step tips. This is also step 1 in your workbook, so you can turn to that page. Diet culture, and I love Christy Harrison's definition, and I'm going to read it to you. Diet culture is a system of beliefs that worships thinness and equates it to health and moral virtue, which means you can spend your entire life thinking you're irreparably broken just because you don't look the impossible thin. Ideal. Diet culture is a system that promotes weight loss as a means of attaining a higher status, which means you feel compelled to spend an enormous amount of time, energy, and money trying to shrink your body, even though the research is very clear that almost no one can sustain intentional weight loss for more than 2 to 5 years. Only 2% of dieters can do that. And we are also aware that those 2% likely do that because of their disordered thinking and possibly eating disorder that allows them to maintain that weight loss. Diet culture is a system that demonizes certain ways of eating while elevating others, which means you're forced to be hyper vigilant about your eating. You're ashamed of making certain food choices, and you're distracted from the pleasure of food and from your purpose and from your own power. Diet culture oppresses people who don't match up with its supposed picture of health, which disproportionately harms women, femmes, trans folk, people in larger bodies, people of color, people with disabilities, damaging both their mental and physical health. So that's an intense description of diet culture. And when it comes to parenting, something tells me that you don't want your kids to buy into that, right? Dieting means focusing on the external world, impacting your choices about your body and food, rather than focusing on your internal natural body to do the work, your natural cues. Dieting means intentional weight loss, usually at the risk of physical and emotional harm. If you are dieting, chances are very good that you are sending dieting messages to your kids. Any kind of messaging that encourages them to not tap into their natural hunger and fullness cues can lead to dieting, can lead to them dieting. Diet culture sells us this message. Diet culture sells us that there is one body type, the thin ideal. The US diet industry is worth $72 billion. So as you can see, dieting is a gateway to eating disorders or disorder eating. The number one reason people experience disordered eating or eating disorders is dieting. Giving into diet culture means that you are following food rules, ideas that are outside of your body's knowledge, your body's intuition. You lose the ability to understand and tap into your body's cues. You lose trust with your body. We are all born with the right to know how to eat. We are born with the ability to listen to our body's cues. We are born to listen to our fullness, our hunger, and find satisfaction. This is intuitive eating and the exact opposite of dieting. Now, what very often comes up after I give that explanation is the question of health, is the question of exercise and nutrition. I am not saying that exercise and nutrition are bad. Actually, they're excellent and very good, and you should be focusing on them. However, it turns out that the kind of healthcare we receive, the quality of our friendships, our sleep, the level of stress, our education, socioeconomics, genetics, all of these things make a huge difference in our longevity and overall health. Exercise and food play a tiny role in overall health. Studies vary, actually. Some say 30%, some say 15% or less. So take a look at how little your dietary pattern and physical activity have to do with your overall health as a child. Yet because we live in diet culture, we, forget about all of these other things with the expense of our mental health because we become obsessed with what we eat and how much we exercise. The pull of conforming is huge. That's the problem, the pull of conforming. There is safety in conforming. But the thing about being safe in conformity is that that safety also takes away the trust that we need in ourselves. We can change that though, and we can change that for our kids. I want to address the obesity epidemic because it always comes up and people are always confused about it. So many studies have actually debunked the BMI, even though it is still being used very widely in the healthcare industry. But the US has become obsessed with thinness. And remember, the diet industry is $72 billion. And so is our healthcare system. And so we've pathologized larger bodies by calling them diseased. But it's not an obesity epidemic. Instead, what researchers in this work, in this anti-diet, weight-inclusive work call it, is an obsession with the thin ideal, is an obsession with dieting. Correlation is not causation. Just because you are living in a larger body does not mean you're automatically doomed with poor health. Guess what? I am 5'3" and I weigh over 200 pounds, and I am in excellent health. Scientists who've taken apart weight and obesity studies have shown in a few meta studies, large studies, that there are actually two things that do have a causal relationship when it comes to weight and health. And those two things are weight stigma and yo-yo dieting, weight cycling. Those two things we know are a direct result of dieting, weight stigma and weight cycling. The reason why people cycle through weight loss after weight loss after weight loss is because it is impossible to sustain weight loss, because your body sends you tons of messages through the release of chemicals and hormones that your body should do whatever it can to regain weight. So it not only sends your brain these messages, but it releases chemicals as well in your body that says, hurry up, gain weight, because you are not healthy and you're going to starve. So because of that, it's impossible to keep weight off. At the bottom of the step 1 page in your workbook, I have a couple of questions for you. I encourage you to take a look at them in your time, in your free time. These are the kinds of questions that I ask when we begin a coaching journey together. Okay, intuitive eating. Now we're going to start to get positive. Intuitive eating. Christy Harrison, I told you about her. She revolutionized in my mind this anti-diet approach to living. Elyse Resch and Evelyn Tribole wrote the book Intuitive Eating. The 4th edition is the book that you want. It's called Intuitive Eating, the 4th edition. So Christy Harrison, though, has taken Elyse Resch and Evelyn Tribole's work and I think made it a little bit more user-friendly to some extent. Christy Harrison writes that the intuitive eating definition is this. Intuitive eating is really about helping people reconnect with the innate skill of relating to food in their bodies. Babies know to cry when they are hungry and to push food away when they are done. Intuitive eating is getting back to this natural way of relating to food and your body. It's about shifting from self-control to self-care. And guess what? There have been over 125 studies on intuitive eating showing a variety of benefits, such as lower LDL, bad cholesterol, greater psychological well-being, and higher self-esteem, which, by the way, I feel all of thanks to intuitive eating. Intuitive eating is a dynamic mind-body integration of instinct, emotion, and rational thought. It is a personal process of honoring your health by paying attention to the messages of your body and meeting your physical and emotional needs. is an inner journey of discovery that puts you front and center. You become the expert on your body. Only you know how hungry you are, and only you know what food or meal will satisfy you. This is a quote from Evelyn Tribole, who wrote the Intuitive Eating Workbook, which I also highly recommend. So there are 10 principles. And as a coach, I would take you through all the principles. Sometimes we start at principle 5, sometimes at 1, depending on where you are. A good way to start practicing intuitive eating is to tap into your intuition and slow down when you eat, and try to eat when you are not distracted. I did this morning. I had 2 pieces of pizza for breakfast, and I ate them with no phone, no newspaper, no children, no husband, nobody, just me, my 2 pieces of pizza, and my kitchen. And I loved those pieces of pizza. They were delicious. I'd like to take a moment to discover for ourselves what our hunger and fullness is like right now. One of the things you can do with your children is you can ask them, hey, on a scale from 1 to 10, let's see if you can figure out where you are when it comes to hunger and fullness. All right. So on a scale from 1 to 10, I want you to fall into your body, really think, become aware of your body sensations. Notice how your body feels. And I would like you to think about where you are on a scale from 1 to 10 in terms of your fullness. 1 being not full at all, 1 being extremely full. So take some time to figure that out. And then do the same thing with hunger. On a scale from 1 to 10, how hungry are you now? If 1 is not at all hungry and 10 is the hungriest you have ever been in your life, where are you right now? This is a great way to start introducing intuitive eating for your children. Step 3, I want to tell you about the division of responsibility. Ellen Satter's work, Ellynsatter, is the gold standard of how to raise children to trust their bodies with food. So some of Ellen Satter's work, her work is old. It is decades old. And some of it is controversial, but I like the majority of it. And most anti-diet people do as well. And it is just widely used. So I've taken her work and I've added my own spin to it. But before I explain it, what I want you to know, like desperately know, is that this is all nuanced and should be adapted to you and your individual circumstance. And it takes time to implement, like a long time, like maybe years, maybe months, I don't know, maybe weeks. It's tricky, it's confusing, and that's all right. And the reason why it is because it's anti-diet. It is countercultural from what we are doing right now with exercise and food in this country. So this is where coaching comes in my experience, to help you unpack your feelings around this and make it work for you and your family. So Ellen Satter's DOR, division of responsibility, is the idea that your responsibility as a parent is to decide what food is provided for your kids, when they will eat it, and where. Your child's responsibility is to decide what they will eat and how much from what you provide. Only they can decide what their body feels like with food in it. Only your children can. Your job in practicing DOR is to ensure that the environment in which they eat is one without pressure, without restriction, without limits, without threats, and without conditions attached. Your job is to create an environment that is neutral and peaceful around food, where food is not labeled as good or bad. And you can do the same thing with exercise. Now, some sensitive kids can pick up on even the slightest bit of pressure, especially if the pressure is repetitive. So I told you that this is 5 parenting tips for developing healthy and empowered eaters. And DOR, in my opinion, is the way to produce an empowered child, an empowered eater. An empowered eater is an eater who receives support without feeling controlled. Being controlled leads to the exact opposite. Kids will resist all new foods or be a people pleaser because they want to please you by eating the foods you tell them they should eat. Either way, you are not building the body and food trust that you want them to build, that is so critical so that they can become intuitive eaters and find satisfaction in food. Food restriction, as I told you, did I tell you, is really dieting. And it's scary because it can do a lot of damage. And as I said, it's a gateway to eating disorders. I want to show you what restricting candy to a child looks like. A parent fears the child will overeat. The parent limits access to candy. The child feels restricted. Then what happens? The child sneaks or binges candy. Then the parent thinks the child has no self-control with candy and is fearful that the child is going to overeat more. And so they limit candy and the child feels restricted. And this restriction cycle goes on and on and on and is perpetuated. I do this work so that you can stop the restriction cycle. So in DOR land, these kinds of statements, you'll see when I say them, don't really align with the DOR philosophy. Finish your carrots before you have dessert. If you hit your brother one more time, you're losing dessert for a week. Take a no thank you bite just once, and then you can leave the table. So all of these statements come with conditions, right? And limitations, taking away trust from the child. Now, so essentially the attitude you take when it comes to feeding your kids, as you see, is far more important than what you feed them. I will repeat. If you have not listened this entire time, listen now. This is possibly the most important information. The attitude you take on when it comes to feeding your kids is far more important than what you feed them. Remember, with DOR, there is nuance. It takes a while to learn how to do this. And it's really important that you remember that. Because if you want to, again, be counter to all of the cultural conforming that everybody is telling you out there to do, you're going to have to practice this over and over and over again, and you will misstep. You will not get it right. I can guarantee it, because it's such a huge change. Now, a lot of this is very scary. For me, it was. There was no way I was going to do this, by the way, in the beginning, because I didn't want my kids to eat everything all the time. That's what I thought it was. I thought it was just like, give them whatever they want to eat all the time. It's not. It's not. Instead, it's about having discernment around what you think is right for them to eat so that they can trust in themselves. And there will be many times, that you are not going to give them the candy they want, that you're not going to give them the carb snack they want, that it's not pizza night again, because that is not what you're serving and it is not time for it. So what you can say is, I know you really want candy. We're not having it now. We're going to have it actually with dinner. Now, a lot of people who practice DOR like to present family style meals. So you put on the table lots of different choices of foods, a variety of foods, and always a safe food, a food that your child will like to eat. The ultimate goal, remember, is body trust, is food trust. The ultimate goal is you entrusting in them that they will make choices that feel good in their bodies And they then develop trust in you that you will make the environment conducive to making choices that feel best for them at the moment. My question to you is, do you want your child to eat a bite of broccoli one dinner a week for many years of their lives, but then never touch it again because they're so mad at having to do that? Or do you want them to have a positive relationship with it? So maybe they want to try it later when they're 10, 15, 20 years old or later. And then maybe they'll actually want to eat it for the rest of their lives. And also, sometimes kids want to just test boundaries, and that is perfectly fine. Lee Moore, what about the basic building blocks of nutrition? Yes, the basic building blocks of nutrition absolutely matter. And I am not a nutritionist, so if you are worried about the nutrition that your children are receiving, please see your pediatrician or a registered dietitian. But the basic building blocks of nutrition is protein, carbs, and fat. If you are worried that your children are eating too much food that you label as junk, which I don't actually recommend labeling food as junk, because we want to put all food on the level playing field. Ask your pediatrician if your kids are growing. Usually they are, and that's because they are getting the basic building blocks of nutrition. But remember the social determinants of health, that actually exercise and what they put in their mouths makes up like a tiny percent. And so genetics is much bigger, and so is sleep and avoiding risk and having access to healthcare. So actually eating candy really matters this much. And remember, your attitude toward the sweets is more important than actually eating the sweets. Sometimes you want your child to eat a lot of junk food or a lot of candy or sweets or chips or whatever it is that you label as junk, because you want them to experience what it's like to have these foods in their body, to have a lot of these foods in their body, so that they can know for next time, you know what? I didn't like that feeling at all. I've got to stop. Now, there are definitely children who have trouble with this, and I'm not going to talk about neurodivergence, but that is absolutely something to consider here. However, I believe that over time, children can, just as adults can, even in diet culture, even after dieting for decades, understand how these foods feel in our bodies and then decide over time, this just doesn't feel good. A pound of candy is just not going to give you the same energy as 2 slices of pizza or a really hearty sandwich or, other food that we eat. All right. I know you have questions about DOR. I'm going to take them soon. It's 9:47. We're going to keep going through tips 4 and 5, which are actually rather quick. Tip 4 for raising kids who feel empowered and healthy. Tip 4 is to love your kids' bodies just the way they are right now, today. Establish unconditional love for your kid's body, regardless of what their habits around food are, and regardless of what their body looks like. This does not mean you have to love your body. Understand this as a critical piece in the establishment of a diet-free life. Bodies come in all shapes and sizes. I say this all the time. Try to think about why this might be difficult for you. It's so common and makes sense in diet culture, right? This like most cunning and powerful societal norm, right? And it might mean that you fake it till you make it. Totally fine. So if you feel like you've been dieting in plain sight of your kids, explain to them that you've made some mistakes and that you've followed external rules and not your body's cues. And now you're changing that. Explain that you're not dieting because You are respecting your body. And this is the way you are choosing to respect your body and allowing it to be a vessel from which you can experience life. Explain that you will love your children regardless of their body shape and size, regardless of what they look like, even when you make a mistake, and do emphasize their looks or what they eat or their bodies. You are learning. This is diet culture. I think I've said the words diet culture like 50 times. For many kids, the message that their body is bad is actually more toxic than what they put in their mouths or how they move or how much they exercise. So I'll say it again, your child's relationship with food and their bodies is more important than what they put in their bodies. So guys, shame is a part of being human. But the way to combat shame is to know when it exists and to not use language that supports it. When you do hear about body shame from your kids, ask about how they're feeling and give them an opportunity to process their feelings. Sometimes all your kids want after they've experienced body shame is for you to just be there. Sometimes there are no words. And by the way, body shame is everywhere and can be in little tiny bits of messaging that maybe you don't even see or they don't see, but really like subconsciously is sinking in there. You know, thinness, youth, whiteness, beauty, these have all become part of what is good and relatable. But we can remove this from our home. And I know you can do this too because I have done it. We have a rule in our house that we don't comment on appearance at all, ever, not good or bad. Now, myself and my husband are good at this. My children, not so much. My 17-year-old will say, how do I look in my outfit? And I'll just be like, fine. So I try to neutralize the whole thing because she's on social media and I know that she'll go to school and they'll all be talking about their outfits. And so I try to just like tamper it here at home. Appearance is the least important and least interesting thing about us. We are worthy regardless of what we look like. Okay, to end step 4, I will say that one of the best things you can do to show your child unconditional love in the body that they have right now is to spend quality time with them. It doesn't have to be a lot. It can be 15 or 20 minutes. Make it a gift. Make it special time. Have them decide what you want to do, what they want to do. Do it together and commit to it. Don't flake on it. And when you're engaged in this quality time and this special time, remove distractions and just stay focused. Sometimes this will mean doing really boring, mundane things with them. Other times it will be exciting for you. A lot of the time, you may not really want to do it anyway. And some of the time, it may be that your children don't talk with you at all, or some of the time, they may be talking incessantly. But make sure they know that this is really important for you. So about 15 or 20 minutes a day, a couple of days a week is a good rule of thumb. Maybe there are weeks where you can't do it. Okay, try to get there. The last tip, the last parenting tip, self-compassion. And this parenting tip I put in because I know that we all struggle with this as parents. So my favorite thought leader on self-compassion is Kristin Neff. Dr. Kristin Neff, and I'm going to show you a video of Dr. Kristin Neff talking so that she can explain to you what self-compassion is. She will do a much better job than I will.
Kristin Neff. And for the past 2 decades, I've been researching and teaching others about the importance of self-compassion. So what is self-compassion? Well, it's simply compassion turned inward. In the Latin, passion means to suffer, come is with. So how are we with our own suffering? Whether it comes from making a mistake or feeling badly about ourselves, or when life is just really hard. Are we with ourselves with kindness, care, warmth, and support like we would be for a friend? Well, actually, most of us aren't. Most of us are much harsher, crueler, cold, judgmental to ourselves, certainly than to those we care about. We think somehow it's going to be good for us, but harsh self-criticism, shame, actually just makes us stressed, anxious, and depressed. It makes things harder than they need to be. So when we learn to do a U-turn, to start to give ourselves the same kindness and compassion we naturally give to a friend, it makes things a lot easier in life. We've got better mental health, we're more motivated, we're more focused on learning and growing, our physical health improves, and it just makes it a lot easier to cope with the tough stuff. Luckily, self-compassion is a learnable skill. We can do certain practices to build the muscle of self-compassion. So I hope you explore self-compassion more, because my research and that of hundreds of other researchers show that self-compassion can really change your life for the better.
I love her. So I've heard her interviewed a whole lot on the 10% Happier podcast with Dan Harris. Highly recommend that. He loves her. All right. So on the page in your workbook about self-compassion, I encourage you to answer these questions, to think about this. Some of what I do sometimes in the morning is I will write down a phrase that I'd like to tell myself throughout the day around that feels like self-compassion. Now, the reason why I put this as the last step is because all of what I told you is really hard to implement. And you're going to get it wrong because you're a human being. Because making change takes a really long time sometimes. And so it doesn't make you a bad person. Instead, if you practice self-compassion during the experience, you'll be talking to yourself as if you're a good friend, and you'll see that actually you're doing the best you can and you're trying. And you can explain self-compassion to your kids as well. And you can tell them that you practice it because you want to make changes. So that is step 5. Thank you so much for listening. I want to just mention a couple of other things and then open it up for questions. You guys were awesome listeners. I'd like you to actually think about one aha moment that you had from what I just talked about. And if you'd like to, if you feel comfortable, maybe you can share it in a couple of minutes. So this is a lot to swallow, what I talked about. It's a lot, and it takes time. But with my coaching, I guarantee you it will take less time. Having someone hold you accountable for change makes change possible. Doing it yourself, telling yourself a different story is possible, but difficult to do without support. I've been trained in how to make sure you change. So my coaching packages are on my website. Right now, I'm offering 10% off for all attendees who've registered for today's program. If you purchase a 3-month or 6-month coaching program with me before June 15th. I am also going to be offering a Voxer or WhatsApp coaching program. This will be a coaching program where actually I don't do any live coaching. Instead, we leave each other messages on either WhatsApp or Voxer, depending on what you feel comfortable with. So you would leave me an unlimited number of messages for 5 days. And I will respond usually once or twice at the end of the day. And so that's at about 4 or 5 p.m. 1 week of Voxer or WhatsApp coaching with me right now, because you've attended this course, is $77. And that starts with a 1 hour discovery session. It's possible that after the 1 hour discovery session, I will feel that we need a little bit more time. And so we could set up some more time after that. So it's a great way for you to get a feel for what I do, and not, dive into the 3 or 6 month package. It's a little taste of the kind of coaching I do. I don't recommend it as, coaching forever. Also, please follow me on Instagram. And a good way to learn more about me is to sign up for a free discovery call. Do you guys want to share your ahas, or do you feel like that's so annoying and why are you making me do that? Karen.
I wanted to share that. So, I've taught yoga. I've done a lot of mind body stuff. And this is, I would say, an ally in all of this is mindfulness based stress reduction. Because part of that training and part of the practice is mindful eating. And it doesn't come with a history of conflict,
Yeah.
so it's kind of another easy way in where you practice eating a raisin.
That's right. That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
I put mine in chat, but
Okay.
this fullness versus hunger, that they're different.
Mm-hmm.
I never really thought of them as different.
Yeah, I have had when I went through this process, and still sometimes I've had trouble with hunger, because of all the dieting that I've done. When hunger comes, not anymore as much, it feels like an emergency. But that doesn't happen as much. And so, yeah, it can get confusing to like suss it out. And when you're really not tapping into, your body's cues. Thanks, Erin.
So I thought I didn't realize because we live like this period in our household, like in terms of food and not talking about our bodies. And I kind of just thought it was just us because I grew up in that environment where my mom was constantly dieting and my coaches were encouraging me to lose weight constantly. I was being weighed. It was terrible and ultimately turned into an eating disorder, as you said. This is what can happen in this diet culture. So once I had kids, decided there was no way that my kids were going to be exposed to this in our household. And I definitely I see it. It's in our culture. We have friends and families that we're friends with, and I'll hear, oh, I'm fat or I'm this, and I hear it and I cringe.